and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to another week of Global Café. My name is Natalie Mystery, Senior Policy and Project Coordinator here at the IFA. And today I am very excited to be introducing you all to Ms. Kim Samuel on the topic of building connection to the 4 Ps: people, power, place, and purpose. So Kim Samuel is a leading voice in the global movement for belonging. She's the author on belonging, finding connection in an age of isolation, an exploration of the crisis of social isolation and humanity's right to belong. She is also the founder of the Samuel Center for Social Connectedness, or SCSC, a research, advocacy, and action group that partners with and convenes leading academics and changemakers to combat social isolation and build belonging around the world. In 2024, she launched the Belonging Forum, a new solutions-focused initiative that completed a groundbreaking study on the state of belonging in the United Kingdom, drawing on a survey data from 10,000 participants. Kim is a research fellow at the Oxford Poverty and Human Development Initiative, University of Oxford, and an associate fellow at Green Templeton College, Oxford University. She regularly lectures at institutions including Oxford, Harvard, and London School of Economics, and she created and taught a first-of-its-kind course in the study of social isolation at McGill University. Kim's work is built on the idea that belonging isn't just a human need, but a birthright. Drawing on more than 20 years of research, she works to advance an understanding of belonging that is grounded in the 4 Ps: people, place, power, and purpose. This is to say that belonging comes through our relationships with other people, as well as through our rootedness in nature, our ability to influence social, political, and economic decision-making, and our capacity to find shared meaning and purpose in our lives. Kim serves on the steering committee of the Together Coalition in the United Kingdom, the executive committee of Olympics International, and the Disability Rights Advisory Committee of Human Rights Watch. She is a frequent commentator in outlets including the Times of London, Globe and Mail, The Independent, The Telegraph, The Boston Globe, USA Today, Stanford Social Innovation Review, and Psychology Today. And she has been a guest on more than a dozen podcasts or broadcast shows. So thank you so much for joining us today, Ms. Samuel.
Thank you very much. Please call me Kim. And thank you very much. I'm really excited to be here.
Incredible. All right. So Kim, so we can, jump into some of these questions right now. As mentioned, you are a leading voice for the global movement in belonging. Can you kind of tell us what brought you to this work?
Sure. It's not a new story. It's an old story, but it's the same story every day, what motivates me when I get up. And it's a family story. In 1997, my father had a brain injury out of the blue, and he subsequently was in a coma for 3 months, and then woke up miraculously and very slowly. And he had acquired a lot of disabilities through everything that had happened to him. And of course, we were just thrilled to have him back. And yet the insurance company wouldn't give even $1 toward rehabilitation for him. And I want to point out, this is not unusual, saying that he was in his sundown years. He had just turned 65, I should point out, and that he really wasn't worth the resources to, they didn't say that, they said sundown years, to give him rehabilitation. And yet there was ample support and funds for him to go into a nursing home and live out his days. And that's when I got aware of that there's a rights issue here. Of course, it was my first direct encounter with ageism. And I also saw when he came home that he was often treated, even by well-meaning friends, the way that they saw him the first day he came home, if that makes sense. And people were assumed somehow that he couldn't really hear. His hearing actually was amazing, so it hurt if people talked too loud. And so the well-meaning friends didn't really know what to do, and they kind of backed away. But we also, as a family, got to see that that he was being and this is my word, isolated, and I'll tell you why I use that word, from so many people. And whenever we'd go out and there was were engaging in conversation with us, not with him. And I got to thinking, this is not because of his disabilities, and certainly not because of his age. This is because of the way people are perceiving and treating him. And it came to me because of the disabilities. And then I started to look at work that I'd done in my career till then, which was largely around ending poverty. And I thought to myself, people that are poor are often isolated, turned into the other because of the way they're perceived for being poor. And then I saw that with people with refugees, people with disabilities, older people, and on and on and on. And I just resolved to do something about it. And since then, I've seen isolation as the same image every morning when I get up. It's a figure, a person sitting all alone at the bottom of a well, bottom of a well, out of all circles of concern. And my father passed in 2000. In 2002, and then I'll stop the answer. Don't worry, we won't go every year or two. In 2002, I was introduced to Nelson Mandela, which itself was an incredible experience. When I met him, his wife and also an amazing leader, Gracia Michelle, whom I knew, asked how had I been doing since my father had passed, and I talked a bit about that, how much I missed him, and I said that my work now was all about combating social isolation, and I looked to him a bit nervous because I was meeting a hero of mine, and I said, "Of course, you would know all about isolation." Having been in prison for 27 years, 19 of which were in solitary. He said, "No, I've never been isolated." And that really took me back. I said, "Not even in Robben Island?" He said, "No, because in Robben Island, we were all brothers working together with a common purpose. I was never alone." And that now doesn't feel like a paradox to me. But at the time, I thought, how could someone that had been in these harshest, most isolating conditions not feel alone, isolated? And yet, there's so many of us that can be in the middle of a crowd and feel very isolated. So that was the beginning of the social isolation to social connectedness journey, and then that evolved into belonging.
Incredible. Thank you for sharing, the beginnings of, the story that brought you to this work. It's quite personal, so thank you for sharing that. But
Sure.
and then even the example that you brought in later on, we have that physical, connection with people, but it might not be the social aspect, and that's what separates us and creates that isolation. So actually, as a nice segue, if you could, from your perspective, if you could define social connectedness and social isolation, and if you could also describe it within the context of aging, if possible.
Okay, sure. And I want to, just before I give my understanding, it's the same. There's a lot of textbook definitions of both, but I also would imagine that everyone who's joined this webinar would have their own understanding. But these are the words that I gravitate to. And I'll start with social connectedness, which is feeling connected to your community and to yourself, and it's an essential component of the experience of belonging. And as you noted, and I'll just mention them again, that I explain this through these four dimensions of belonging, and it's in connection to people, which may be quite obvious, but also connection to place and to power and to our purpose. One of the I guess founding concepts that I've learned a lot from, or founding in terms of how I put all this together, is the South African principle of Ubuntu, which you're probably also familiar with, which goes like this: I am what I am because of who we all are. So social isolation, on the other hand, is the result of broader failures at multiple systemic um, levels. I've described it as the feeling of sitting all alone at the bottom of a well. I may meet someone one day who loves sitting all alone at the bottom of a well. I haven't yet, but here's the thing, they would choose to sit there. The socially isolated person doesn't choose. You may choose to be alone or have your time in solitude, and in my case, nature always does it for me, but I choose that. And social isolation is also something that there's an absence of choice, of voice, um, and recognition. But the reason that I mention this in terms of systemic levels is because it's different than loneliness. Which is not to say that, I mean, loneliness is a good thing, but I look at social, it's a terrible thing, but I look at social isolation as something that can happen not only to individuals, but also to whole groups of people who are systematically othered, being made less than. And I would give an example, such as forced migrants who have no choice, no voice, no agency. And at the same time, we could look at a news clip and say, oh, look, I'm not saying this group would do this, but because look, but they're really happy because the group's together and they've lost their home, they've lost everything, but they're together. And I don't think that being together is excuses the fact that you don't have the things that you have a right to. When you ask about connecting this to older people, I just want to say, Matali, I never don't connect this to older people. I think about what it means because of what happened to my dad, especially, but that opened my eyes to a whole world that I hadn't seen before. Is is that you can be turned into the other or be made to feel redundant or even be made redundant if you turn 65 and you're being told that your company has mandatory retirement. And I don't think that it's enough to say, well, so and so gets a visit every week or a hot meal every day, because that isn't also reciprocal. When we have social bonds, there's reciprocity. We each have something to give. I know that I'm talking to an expert group, so I don't want to go too much farther, but just to say that when I think about older people, and I think about, um, not to say there aren't good ones, but I think about a lot of the so-called care, so-called homes for older people that I've seen. There's no recognition of the rights of that person, and no recognition of our right to live in community. So I feel really strongly about this from a family, personal point of view. I should proudly share that I'm in my 60s. Um, and uh, and so I'm aware of some of these little things that are, and they're not little, but some of the kind of things or choices, or who gets to do what and who doesn't. Sometimes the subtle things are the things you have to watch out for. And I've definitely seen my share of ageism, but I'm also are I'm also resolved to help to do something about that for everybody.
Absolutely. I love that you touched on a couple of different things like that right there. Even Anna Maria Cruz, she mentioned, social isolation and loneliness are related but not the same. And this is something that you just touched on and went into detail with some of the examples that you mentioned, and even including the aspect of, our rights as humans in the context of all that. So, yeah, thank you for kind of bringing that all into the context of aging as well. Really appreciate that. And just to move on to my next question, what are some aspects of life that are really impacted by a lack of inclusion or connection with others? And this is as broad as you want to bring it.
Well, yeah, I would start with all.
Yeah.
I would. I think it's that vital.
Mhm.
So, but I'll just come up with a few now. And
Yeah,
again, I feel that I'm speaking to people who know all this, so I'm going to just situate where I come from,
for
but
sure.
hopefully others will get to join in our conversation.
For sure.
So we know that we humans are social creatures. So the connection or a lack of connection impacts everything. How we engage with friends and family, I think that would be number one, and other people that really matter to us. It's hard to be present as a partner or a friend, a parent, if you feel lonely or disconnected. I think that the listening part is really important and gets overlooked. And I'll speak specifically about older people when it seems sometimes I've traveled, I've traveled not all the world, but a lot of the world, and I see over and over when again, well, I'm talking about really well-meaning people. They want to take care of someone who's older, but sometimes treat that person like they're a child again, which I think none of us deserve or want to have happen. It's not to say that caring isn't hugely important, but you have to meet each other in the middle. I would think about the workplace, uh, whether we go into an office or hybrid or it's everyone has a right to work, but also to feel that that work is meaningful and have genuine connection with colleagues. I would say, but I should also broaden that. I don't only mean gainful employment. I mean whatever we're doing, and I don't. When in my work with our Center for Social Connectedness, we have one of our programs is Social Connectedness Fellows, and until this year, till a couple of years ago, they were mostly coming out of universities, people that were graduating, had graduated, and this is a great, summer in between there, we hope, and whatever they do next. And this year, for the first time, and I guess we should have done it sooner, but two of our fellows are older people with um, with lived experience, which is not to say that work experience isn't valuable, but you can't have, I don't think, a lot of wisdom personal bias, until you've got some years and real life experience. And you should see there's no work to be done about bringing older and younger together, by the way, no work at all. People make their friends, find their bonds. And now I'm feeling like that we should be doing a lot more of this and not make it a big deal, if that makes sense, because it's not. It's just how it should be anyway. Our mental, sorry, I'll keep going. Mental and physical health. We know there's so much research about this, that loneliness and isolation lead to higher rates of anxiety, depression, dementia, poor sleep, high blood pressure, Parkinson's, and early death. And I'm sure you've had people talking about that. I'm just running through a quick list. It's bad. And when we talk about what kind of health, do we mean physical health or mental health or social well-being? I talk about health. It's all of it, and they
Mhm.
all completely interrelate. And the lack of connection can also be exploited in terms of things like political engagement, or in terms of taking advantage of people. And I think we all deserve support, and we all give support anywhere we are in our lives. And yet I still see and hear, read, look at so many situations where that older person is identified because of their age, not because of who they are as a person. And I don't know if there's a cutoff number. Now I'm glad we say older people. We don't say this age or that age. But I got to tell you, people know it when it happens, and I don't think that it should be seen as okay for anyone to be lonely or isolated. And how else would you feel if you saw that society wasn't listening, paying attention, wanting to be there with you? So I think that these things in life, um, Kim, quick life lesson, that seem small, they're the huge ones. And I
Absolutely.
think if we paid more attention to that, and to reciprocity and caring, then we would have stronger stronger voices and voices of older people represented where decisions are being made, making those decisions.
100%, wholeheartedly agree with everything you just said. Especially the impact on not just, the social aspect, but your mental and physical health altogether. And then
Mhm.
within so many realms of our lives, you don't realize how connected we are with so many different, things that are happening in the world day to day. And I especially agree with, the intergenerational aspect of, connection. I think that should also be something that should be just a thing that's happening in our world. Absolutely. And just moving along, you've already kind of touched on it, but I was wondering, that you mentioned that your approach to the definition of belonging is based on the connection between the four P's, people, place, power, and purpose. Do you mind expanding on this connection between these four P's and their relation to belonging?
Sure. And I want you to know that I would be welcome. I'd welcome any other P's as I go through this,
For
but I
sure.
didn't choose them because it was easy to remember, although it is easy to remember with the P, but because and I want to say this is not really the philosophy is about right to belong. This is just I find a really good tool
Mhm.
and that we can use. So the first P is people, and that's our connection to our community and to those around us, and relationships that are rooted in reciprocity. Place is feeling at home in the spaces that we inhabit, and that's neighborhoods, natural environment. I love being in nature. I always feel that sense of place. It can be our workplace, it can be our recreational spaces. It can be everywhere. But when you're out, whether you're in a group or especially on your own, and you for some reason don't feel really comfortable, even though someone greeted you at the door, I tell people you're right then. If you don't feel comfortable, there's something else going on here, and that sense of place is also sense of self. I feel them really well, strongly linked. Power. Well, power is a big word, isn't it?
Mhm.
For me, power is really about empowerment because we all have we all have power within ourselves, but it doesn't have to be to have power over someone. It can be about empowering one another and having agency and influence over the systems that govern us. Purpose? Well, purpose is believing in something bigger than ourselves. It's our own personal sense of why. Um, for people that either follow, if you follow a particular faith, that can also give you that connection, that deeper connection of what I haven't really done much on it actually. I want to write another book um, around which I won't start writing this morning, don't worry, but about belonging and faith, but not only belonging in religion, but have faith in one another and what's happened to that and that constant sense of purpose. I should add I'm a grandma, and since I became a grandma, I I have my sense of purpose is completely changed. I work hard. I hope I do good work. Try to be a good member of the community and so on. But now that I've reached this stage of grandma, I really don't think much else. I do the other stuff, but not much else matters because there's these little people, and I feel I've got lots to share, and they've got lots to share with me. You don't have to be a grandma. I never thought I was going to be a grandma, by the way. But having young, little people around, it's
Mhm.
again, it's not even hard. It just happens, right? And so I get a lot of purpose just from knowing that I have more value within myself than I ever thought before, and to just show up. That's the biggest thing.
Absolutely. Actually, on that note, I was wondering, what on your book called On Belonging: Finding Connection in an Age of Isolation, I was wondering if you could actually just tell us a little bit about the book itself, and kind of what inspired you to write it.
Oh, thank you. Well, Um, the book is the title is kind of explicit. Took almost a year to get the title. A book on belonging, and in the end, it's called On Belonging, which I think is kind of funny. But I I've been at this, for I guess I would say since 2002 in a way when I met Nelson Mandela. That kind of galvanized what I'd learned because of what happened with my dad. And I'd done quite a bit of work in this ever expanding field. And about 10 years before I started the book, I thought, I'd like to write a book about this, and I'd like to write it uh, for anyone who might relate to this experience. And I'll tell you, it was 10 years later that I started, and it wasn't because of inspiration. It was that finally I had the confidence to do it, and I felt that I knew enough to start. And I wanted to talk about belonging as not simply a word that we say. Let's Everyone talks about belonging. There's a cafe down the street from where I live called the Belong Cafe. During COVID, I had pneumonia and eventually came to New York City to get some help to get my lungs back in shape. And I walked and walked and walked, and so I saw all these houses of worship of all different faiths, and many of them would have you belong here, belong. That word would be in there, and of course all of them were closed. They might be doing something virtually in a nearby park. So I thought, this is really a challenge because of what it means to belong and how vital it is. And I wanted to get some research done. And there's nothing like having to put something in print to really speed up one's timetable. And I wanted to talk about belonging and of course isolation, and which is where it started. I wanted to talk about it related to various say, I shouldn't say group. Again, we have our identity is huge, but in terms of older people, I wanted to talk about in terms of people with disabilities and in terms of people that have been refugees. And I found at that point in my life, I knew a lot of people. And I interviewed over 150 people for about an hour each, and only one person that I asked declined to be interviewed, and that's because he was in the middle of writing his own book. So I saw that people wanted to talk about this, and what does it mean to belong is a question that we don't always ask ourselves. Or what do we value? We don't always have the time to ask ourselves that. Or what have we forgotten? What have we forgotten as humanity, that are simple things like caring for one another. And then I wanted to turn that into a book with a lot of stories, because we know that stories of real people are the most powerful. And I guess mostly at the end, I really wanted to show people that when we feel this way, we didn't do anything wrong. We didn't do anything wrong, and that I feel that people can carry sort of, what's wrong? I'm so lonely. That's my fault. There's so many things I can get up and do. And actually, I think unless we're met there by a lot of support and structures and policies and so on, but also just simple take care of one another, that I just wanted people to know that it isn't your fault, and that this can happen to anyone, everyone. And I think that as we see, for example, and I know that your organization, and probably many of you on this call, are involved with the open-ended working group on aging at the United Nations. And after over a decade, right, Mitali, now there's real progress being made for a new international legally binding instrument around the rights of older people. And I think this is worth mentioning because that's a really long time for me. We're now in the 2020s, and it's over 10 years of discussions. I got to be a tiny part of those, but it was really great to learn what was happening. And still, it's actually a question whether or not older people, as opposed to all adults, should be regarded in the same way. So the book, I read 300 books to write one book. my eyeglass prescription increased
Oh no.
exponentially through the process, and I think people enjoy the book. I've heard from lots of people who have read it. And my daughter, when I told her recently, her name's Caitlin, I think I'd like to write another book. She said, "But mom, you said it almost killed you to write your book." I said, "Yeah, but I'm still here."
Exactly. It was beneficial at the end, you know? You still get the, you were satisfied with the results and what.
I was proud that I accomplished a goal
Exactly.
that I'd had for a long time.
Exactly. And that's
Yeah.
fantastic to have, right?
Mhm.
Um, Absolutely. So I think at this point in time, I'm going to invite audience members to post some questions in the chat, and we might bounce back and forth between some of the questions or comments posted in there. And then I also still have a few questions to work through as well, so we can kind of get some audience participation. That would be lovely. I think I'm going to start with a question over here from Shmuel. So his question is essentially, how according to you, let's see over here. So I guess like, what is the connection between the four Ps and adults coming from more of a lower socioeconomic background?
Um, if I'm gonna respond, but if I'm not hitting it right based on the question, then you let me know. Okay.
For sure, for sure.
Uh, would the low, yeah, I mean, I see I guess the and I could be interpreting wrong, but I think the question might be under the question is how can these principles apply to lower income people the same way we might say everyone should eat a whatever kind of diet, but they may not have even access to the foods. I see that the four Ps is so fundamental that therefore they apply to everyone, and I see them as completely linked to one another. Which is not to say that people that are experiencing poverty, which is multi-dimensional, including the lack of social connection. This center that I'm part of at Oxford University is all about poverty, multi-dimensional poverty, and I have a part of that which is working on the missing dimension of social connectedness and what that means. But I also want to say that with those four P's, you know, some may have some aspects more than others. And for me, it's purpose. I love people. For me, though, if I don't have a sense of purpose to do something every day, I get a bit lost, and especially if I'm looking, what at a year or a couple of years, I kind of get through by having some purpose of what I'm doing. Why? What am I doing? And if I don't have that, I'm a bit lost. But it could be different for different people. But I think that with the four P's, they're a framework for individuals, everything we all experience belonging differently, but I do want to say that I look at those same four for everybody. And in the book, I get to meet and talk to. Hopefully, I'm taking the reader on a long walk through this book, and we meet lots of different people, and and the answers of what matters are the same. Not that you meet someone and they say, "I'd like to tell you about the four Ps," but they're talking about these different aspects, and it gets into community and how we live, but also a lot of those are connected, really, all of them to human rights that everyone has a right to. And I don't know if it was a deep question, so if
Great.
I didn't get it
It
right,
is
I'm
it is a
happy
deep
to try
question,
again.
but I think you did it beautifully. Thank you. We have a comment here from Catherine Klein. Catherine, I was wondering if you wanted to unmute yourself and if you wanted to kind of echo your comment.
Sure. Thank you so much, Kim. This has been fascinating. I have a 99-year-old healthy mother, somewhat losing immediate faculties, but doing fine. A New York artist who has been living in Cincinnati, Ohio, at this point without her husband after many years, and living in a wonderful residence. And this is the first time her daughters and she email each other every day. And just for the last 2 weeks or so, she has called herself old. And so I was fascinated that you said, oh, the definition of old is almost individually determined, because she's never said this before.
Yeah.
And what is important, and again, it's just a comment, is what makes her life important is that she is engaged as an artist. She does readings about her writing before groups of people. She is one of the few that attends exercise class. And she also helps the woman who does all the wonderful activities. So you're 100% right. And then that contrast, and I'll stop shortly, to my mother-in-law who passed away. And for the last year or two of her life, she lived by herself by choice with a neighbor we paid to come in and help her, but living doing nothing. And she had been a vibrant actor, singer, and that all disappeared. And as far as I could tell, the last year or two of her life was nothing. And that was unfortunately by choice.
Mhm. I'm really happy to hear about your mom, Catherine. That's really inspiring. And just to maybe not to say this applies with your family, but I'll give you my mom's story. Both my parents are gone, passed. And my dad died, uh, 4 years after the brain injury. And my mom uh, died in 2008, 8 years later. And she, for the last years of her life, had a whole different group of friends than she'd had before, because my mom was, I think, quite young. She passed at 74, and the parent, the parents, but the couple friends, they weren't inviting her to. She wasn't invited to things with it's like very pronounced with and I noticed this of other women that had been widowed or so on, that sometimes you're not invited, or you're invited and you feel like you're the proverbial fifth wheel. And so she actually, her group of friends changed, and it was a group of, ready for this, of gay activists, men. And they became her friends, and one was her friend and was the chairman of or she was the chairman of the museum where we were, sorry, and he was the head of it. And Liza, her name was Elizabeth, everyone called her Liza, and she was, they were so active, my mom and dad, and so she called them they were the merry men, and mom and the merry men would go on holiday and just welcomed her like family. And so I think sometimes when people choose, like your mother-in-law chose that, but um, maybe some of us find it easier than others, like who pops in, who are the new friends, who are the people that fade away. And your mom's story is like, that's who I want to be. Really inspiring.
Thank you. Thank you, Catherine, for sharing, and thank you, Kim, for that reflection on there. We have a question here from John Peters. So he asks, do you see a difference in escaping loneliness and beginning to belong between men and women?
Oh, well, men and women are different. We know this, in terms of many different aspects. And so I would wager to say that we experience these things differently. This belonging, started something called the Belonging Barometer in the UK this year, which you mentioned, surveying 10,000 people about their experiences, and around some rural, some urban, and of all different ages. And just by way of reference, by far the group that felt most lonely and most isolated were young women. And I wondered, what about what about men? And by the way, this doesn't mean it's only young women. It was just really startling to see that.
Mhm.
And in terms of the young men we see, and it was expressed in different ways, and also very pronounced, which at ages that we don't expect people to be always at home on a Friday or a Saturday and not knowing who they are. In terms of women and men, and this is anecdotal, not scientific, but I find that, me included, I'm probably more likely to say to a few girlfriends or so, I've really, I really feel lonely and I need to get out, or, I feel however it is. And I say anecdotal, but men don't always, there's still that you don't always share, I think. So the experiences are different, but I don't think that one hurts less or more than the other.
For sure. Just different ways of experiencing it all. Absolutely. Thank you for that. And thank you for your question, John. And we have another question here from Sierra Farrell. If you wanted to unmute and ask your question, if you're still here.
Yeah. Hi, Kim. I was really interested in what you were saying about the intergenerational opportunities and informal ones. The feedback I'm getting here is that people feel since COVID, they're missing more of those informal opportunities. So we are putting on intergenerational activities, but I'm just wondering, do you think there is a difference since COVID? And have you suggestions about how we create more of those informal opportunities?
Yeah, thank you, Clara. I think there's a difference in most everything since COVID. And most of them not positive. Although we did see a lot of times where people came together and helped one another in a way that sadly doesn't help happen unless there's a crisis. But I know what you mean about the informal versus the formal, because formal, even by its name, it's if someone, I don't know about you, someone put me get off the bus and go in, and now that you're going to meet, there's 50 people and no one's met each other, and we would like you to go in and be social, and we would like you to go in and be relaxed. And I'm just thinking, I hope I meet one person. I just need to meet one person. I need one person that can be a buddy and we can go do that together. But informal means, how do we just accidentally, spontaneously end up together? I feel that you may know more about this than me from Age Friendly, but I think that we need to be doing all of this. When I say community, by the way, it doesn't have to be in your neighborhood where you live, but in a way that pick something that people like to do at any age. And that could be, I can't even draw a stick person. I can't. But I love trying and doing kinds of things like that. I have a colleague of mine, and she was experiencing a lot of loneliness, and she's good in art, and she something in the UK, and it's gosh, can't remember exactly the name now, but it has art in it, and it's in a lot of communities, and you can go and create and build and so on. So she went through the intro course, and she made wow, she's really good, did some paintings and so on, and it was about 10 weeks, I think, once a week, and she said she was going to sign up again. And she also told me that everyone in her class except her was an older person. She actually chose a village, not the city where she is. She chose a village, which I think is really important too. She chose a village, and the class that she chose, she said everybody was around 70 and up, and she loved it. So when she signed up again, she signed up for the same introductory class for 10 weeks. And I said to her, well, okay, but like, aren't you supposed to progress? I mean, what's the next one? She said, Kim, she said, everyone who's in the class has been going for a long time, and nobody wants to go to the next one up. Aww. And I thought that was really beautiful. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that gave me an idea about what it takes. I think what it takes, and include totally top of the list. I can't make anyone belong. I can't create that for another person. But we can all work hard to create the conditions for
Yeah.
someone to find their belonging and make it fun. I think the word fun is really underrated.
Mhm.
Fun, light, easy. Yeah, I think I don't know if that's any use.
No, that was
That's
fantastic.
really helpful.
Yeah.
And I'll just add there, because we do intergenerational activities and people always think it's children and teenagers. And
Yeah.
that's since COVID with the Irish pub culture, people are saying we miss meeting people in their 40s, their 30s, that informal mixing. So that's really
Yeah.
helpful. Thank you.
And in both directions. I mean, that's it. It's, you've probably all heard of these, well, around the world now, but examples where you'll have, a nursery school right next to a community center that's more for older people, or you see universities where it's thought that students would want to live in a home. I'm using that word advisedly, with older people, because students don't have any money, and the older people would like to have some company. That isn't what happens. People make friendships. People make friendships, and it's so that I think some of it we have to be intentional what we're doing. Yeah. But I just caught that music and singing are great for belonging. Yes, music and singing, and you don't even have to be great at it, which is important. I was kicked out of the choir at age 11 and never got over it. But I still love to sing, and actually on that there's an amazing place in the outskirts of London, in a town called Thurrock. And there's something there called the Thurrock Opera Company, which is made up of people of all ages who like to sing, although their focus is to bring opera. You never have to have been trained, been in a choir at all. But what they do is incredible. They're great. Can't say enough about them. And I wrote about them in my book too. And some of the people in there have Parkinson's. The singing really helps. The community helps. There's also teenagers in there. They could probably choose another choir where you don't, there are really good singers. I don't mean that, but they'll find a place for everyone. This is way more fun. And during COVID, the group couldn't come together to practice, but they'd meet together virtually, and they would really shore one another up, and they do all kinds of things. But again, it's not, that word prescriptive. It's not prescriptive. It's just what I think what as people we're supposed to do. And my secret weapon is that when I'm bringing lots of people together, where possible, I like to give them a hot meal, and nurture in the food way as well. Usually helps.
Amazing. That's incredible. I think I'm gonna just kind of end our conversation on a comment from Jane Teasdale over here. She said she interviewed her aunt, who is 100 years old now and living in a retirement home in the UK. And she says, Esther points out that you need to have friends of all ages within your social group. She has friends in their 60s, 70s that she speaks to. They visit, they call her, take her out to interesting places in the UK. And so this also includes meaningful conversations, not just small talk. And so you really need to have a good social network around you, keep active, engage within your community programs and faith-based groups. So I think that's a kind of a nice comment to kind of end our conversation. If you wanted to reflect on that comment just for a little, Kim.
Oh, yeah. Well, I just love, I mean, what's smiling. I think we're all just smiling. And I think that, I think we should any of us who have 100-year-old aunts or older should be interviewing them and getting their stories and and meet them wherever they are and telling those stories. So I say about, when I turned 60, I changed the word. So now you're in the whatever, the older, this and that. I said, no, I'm at the beginning of the age of wisdom. And you all, you don't contradict me on that. It's for me to feel. But everyone, the more that we live and learn, and we need to be appreciated for that. And it seems like your aunt has the perfect recipe. And I would say if there was someone else who was 100 and maybe didn't have what seems like an incredibly positive outlook on everything, that we go and hang out with that other person for a while, for as long as they need, maybe be their buddy to go to stuff. And because I think it's hard sometimes to, at any age, but especially if you're around 100, it's maybe not as easy to go everywhere and meet all those new friends. But when you've got a buddy with you, I always like to have a buddy with me, and I'll be their buddy too. It helps. But what a beautiful story to end on. Yeah, I think everyone agrees.
Absolutely, and thank you for that. And we have Dominic Boyd who says, "Stay young at heart." Absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And so now that we are slowly coming close to the end of today's Global Cafe, just before we wrap up, I would love to hear your key takeaways, Kim, from today's discussion. So I'll give you a little bit of time to just gather your thoughts as I will introduce our next week's topic and speaker right now. So please join our discussion next week, which will be hosted by my colleague, Ms. Kara Cruz, with Ms. Maria Iqbal, journalist, aging fellow with the Toronto Star, on the topic of the role of media in framing perspectives on aging. So please join us to listen to that great discussion next week. I think it'll be fantastic. So now we're back to you, Miss Samuel, or Kim, sorry. In a few sentences, what are some of your key takeaways from our conversation today that you would like for all of us to kind of just leave with?
Well, I'm not going to give takeaways from what I said. I'd rather give, because I've done that, to say my key takeaway is what an engaged group. I can see everyone's faces and listening, and I'm seeing all different ages and interest and experience being shared. So I guess my big takeaway is gratitude to this group. And this is really a belonging. It's a virtual space, and it is also a belonging space where people can come and share. And I wish that at gatherings that I'm at or part of or going to, that there were way more older people doing the talk about older people. And I think that I know that organizations like IFC feels the same way. And I guess if anybody would like my book, with Mitali's help, I'd be happy to give it to you as a thank you from me for today.
Thank you so much, Kim, for that takeaway. Gratitude. Absolutely. I think, if we can have a little bit of gratitude every day, I think it'll make a world of a difference. Yeah, and my colleague Bernice just posted in the chat a couple of resources that are connected to Kim right there. You can always get in contact with us if you'd like to, if you're interested in getting a copy of her book. I think it'll be a nice way to kind of continue this conversation, but in book form, which will be nice to kind of have. And yeah, Anna Maria ends it off with saying it is a virtual space that somehow is creating that sense of belonging with common interests. So I think that's really lovely. So thank you so much, Kim, again. Before we sign off, I would also like to thank everyone for another great week of our Global Cafe sessions, with special thanks to Ms. Kim Samuel for joining us today. And a great thanks to the incredible people working here at the IFA who have supported this and every other Global Cafe. In particular today, Ms. Berenice Anaya, who's helping me out, Ms. Luana Colnago, and Ms. Kara Cruz. So thank you so much. We hope to see you all next Friday, and wishing everyone a great weekend. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.